It is so nice to meet you.
Really nice to meet you. The It feels like this is a threshold, really, because you probably know yourself. Living with something like this for every single day for 12 months, and not really having anybody. I mean, I do have one friend who we chat often about this stuff. So he's kind of kept me sane, quite honestly. Um,
Yeah.
but in terms of being able to communicate with many other people, it's been really difficult. But at the same time, it's taken me probably 12 months to really get to grips with all the little sort of components of all this. It's been a journey. If anyone watches Don't Look Up, you can see everything happening within that, and you really should be saying to yourself, where do I fit in within that movie? Which character am I?
Yeah.
I can pick out Eliezer in that, and he is without doubt the Leonardo DiCaprio character. And he's been completely ignored.
Welcome to For Humanity, an AI Safety Podcast, Episode 11, Artist versus AGI, Steven Hansen interview. I'm John Sherman, your host. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the AI Safety Podcast for the general public. No tech background required. This show is solely about the threat of human extinction from artificial intelligence. We're building a community of people here who are AI risk realists. If you are an AI risk realist, you are not alone. This is the year you're going to find your people. This is the year we are going to wake up the world. Today, we're going to meet another person who maybe, like you, is among the AI risk aware. For each of us, there is a moment when we come to grips with the gravity of the challenge that humanity is up against. I'm sure that moment hits differently for different people. Steven Hansen is a painter and digital artist in northern England. He had his moment when he first came to grips with an AGI future more than a year ago in December 2022. He has spent the last year thinking about existential risk and AGI. I hope you will find comfort and fellowship in our conversation. It is so nice to meet you.
Really nice to meet you. It feels like this is a threshold, really, because you probably know yourself. Living with something like this for every single day for 12 months, and not really having anybody. I mean, I do have one friend who we chat often about this stuff. So he's kind of kept me sane, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But in terms of being able to communicate with many other people, it's been really difficult. But at the same time, it's taken me probably 12 months to really get to grips with all the little sort of components of all this. It's been a journey.
Yeah. So tell me, you're ahead of me. I'm only found out in March of this year. So I'm, 9 months or so in. Tell me, the day it hit you, how did you find out? How did you react? Just take me to step one.
I mean, I do remember the day because it was December 16th last year. And I distinctly remember it because I just knew from that moment everything was going to change. And so, yeah, in the sort of, the short sort of answer to that, I suppose it was quite an impact. I've even put it down to a kind of a primal sort of reaction, really, and I kind of worked it out as well. So, but we won't go into that just yet.
Yeah. What was it on December 16th? What, last year, what was it that made you aware?
Instagram, really. The no to AI art symbols that kept coming up. I mean, I've kind of been aware of sort of artificial intelligence like anybody else as you grow up, sort of thing, you know. So it's kind of wasn't a new sort of concept, but for it to be elevated to the point where people were starting to show concern, and quite a lot of them, you know, I mean, a lot of the, you know, just about every Instagram post that particular day, around about that time, it was either the 15th or the 16th, I can't remember which. So obviously the thing is, because I'm a visual development artist and particularly within the digital painting sort of area of things, then obviously a lot of the people that I'm connected with are the same. And this is pretty much where the sort of impact, if you like, came in with such as Midjourney. And so, but obviously when I sort of looked at those symbols, I didn't really know anything about it. So probably for the first time, actually, to be honest with you, I decided to explore on YouTube. So I just punched in that, found an illustrator called Dave McKean, a comic book artist, and he was talking about it, and he gave a really good sort of overview of what his concerns were, and he was relating it to his work, and I think at that point it really shocked me, and I sort of mirrored kind of what he was feeling, really, and I think his main feeling was, why would anybody do this? You know, so it wasn't so much a kind of a direct attack just on you as an artist. It was an attack on a culture, the, you know, human creativity.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I think that's when I started to sort of really dig in further and sort of try to explore more.
Sure. And so the first thing was, I'm an artist. This is really going to affect me, you know, professionally. When did you hit on existential risk?
Fairly shortly afterwards, actually, and because that was the really weird thing. My initial sort of impact, I think, was because when you work at a certain level within any area, and I suppose I could qualify myself as that. You know, I mean, I've been an professional artist for over 40 years, and concentrated very much in the area of digital paintings, and you know, and I'm able to make a living as a professional artist with the skills that I've acquired. And obviously they take a long time to develop those skills, and so to see an image that had sort of cut corners on everything, you know, even if it was just for what I consider to be eye candy images, you know, we can go into it later on as to how these things progress, but just as a display of something whereby you could take, you know, type in a word and then receive an image, and for everybody to be able to do that, that really started to concern me within itself. I mean, it was later that I found out about how they stole everything from us as well, you know, but then, you know, so it kind of unfolds layer upon layer as you look into the AI stuff. And but in terms of the larger threat, that actually kicked in pretty quick, because I obviously, probably like yourself, you know, I started to look at different YouTube channels and listen to various, you know, not just the people that were sort of, you know, sort of reflecting my particular viewpoint. I was trying to find a balanced view of it all, and you know, certainly finding a lot of hatred for artists and vice versa. So, but then I came, I think it was a guy called Procob. He sort of runs a channel within the sort of, you know, the sort of digital art sort of illustrator podcast sort of thing. So he was talking to people along those lines. And I remember he was talking to a guy who was very connected within Silicon Valley. And one of the things that he said, which I found incredible, and obviously the more we've looked back into how these things are made, the first thing he said was, you know, this whole thing to do with either ChatGPT or whether it be particularly the text-to-image models was a kind of an accident. And he was saying that it actually happened whilst they were trying to push forward towards AGI. And so obviously the bells start to ring at that point. And then obviously there was this thing that they keep using, and that is, if we don't do it, China will. So that's when I started to sort of see, it kind of started to answer this question as to why would they do this? And it looked to me like it was just, we're going to do this regardless of any consequences. And I think that's the thing that's really sort of set the whole exploration going.
So for me, it was reading Eliezer's article in Time Magazine, which was this sort of very distilled one-page look at it that was like, this is what will happen. But you were sort of piecing it together from, different YouTubes. When did you put it together in your head that like you, me, we could be the last humans? And how have you been processing that concept since then?
I'm not so sure that I immediately jumped to the end of the world sort of thing. I mean, I have some quite complicated ideas about that, and it depends on how dark you want to go with this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember
the idea that idea that A, we could be the last ones, and B, it's up to us to decide if that happens.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I could go back to what I was saying in the very first place, and that's to do with, a kind of having a kind of a primal reaction to this thing, because I think first and foremost, I found it quite confusing about what it was all about, obviously. So it was kind of, I don't know anything about computers, other than using them, like everybody else. And so it was really a learning curve as to for first, we'll just try to find what the problem was, first and foremost, between artists. And also, I was confused once I'd realised the bigger picture, why everyone was talking about that. A friend of mine lent me a book the other day about the atomic bomb, and one of the very first paragraphs on it was to do with this general basically saying to the guy, look, I'm not going to talk about war because this is far bigger than the war. And so it was kind of like every time you find a new layer to this thing, you eventually you get to there's all kinds of possibilities in terms of, for example, how this thing could get out of control. But to me, I think what I did was I was more focused in on the reasons why the people were actually doing it. I was confused about the ethics of everything. And I think the more that I looked into, particularly Sam Altman, there's so much I could say about that.
What did you find? I mean, give me your Sam Altman ethics in a nutshell. This is the guy with his hand on the steering wheel for the 8 billion of us. What was your take on him?
Disingenuous. I just found he was full of contradictions, really. And I think when we're looking at a person that's actually driving this thing hard, and I think, probably like you, I must have looked at hundreds and hundreds of listened to all kinds of conversations and debates, and I haven't heard one single person actually give us the roadmap on how we get to where they promise. Whereas on the opposite side, people like ourselves who have spent time, not trying to prove that we're right. And I simply can't find any way that we don't lead to a real problem. And yet on the other side of things, they're just sort of, they're contradicting each other. I mean, I remember seeing the one that you on a couple of times on your last podcast to do with, I think Max Tegmark was talking about, and sorry, what was the other guy's name from the other side?
Jan LeCun, the
Yeah.
Facebook guy, Meta guy. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you had Jan saying one thing, and you had what was his partner's
Max,
name?
Joshua Bengio.
No.
Max's Melanie was Jan's partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you even noticed, but they contradicted each other within that, because one of them said this thing would have feelings, and the other one said it wouldn't. And so they were fighting. Yeah. It's just little things like that where really, I mean, I think what it really boils down to, and is that if we are really to trust in their sort of saying that this thing isn't dangerous, then they should at least be able to lay out that something so important, how that is actually going to pan out.
Absolutely. And you are so right about the good case not being laid out either, right? Like both are mysteries. It's the good case is it's going to replace 90% of the jobs with something unknown.
Mm.
We're going to transition through that somehow and get to this new place where, I don't know, where with a touch of a button, you make anything you want instantly for free or something, with no real delineation of how we get from here to there, what's involved, do we have a choice? Like, I don't understand how these people believe they have the moral authority to do this work. You said you looked into that a little bit. Where are you at on that?
Well, I think the conclusion that I've come to really is that I think we've got a problem in the sense that we've got people at the very top who want to make a lot of money, paying people who don't want to stop doing what they're doing based on childhood.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anybody really considers the alternative, because we seem to spend so much time talking about what's going to happen or what's not going to happen, and I don't think anyone's really stopped to think, well, what would the world be like if all of a sudden we did actually stop it? Because I don't think anyone believes it is going to be stopped, so therefore we don't discuss it. But
right, it's like off the table. Like that's not even a possibility. Is actually stopping somehow.
But if that actually did happen, then I suspect that Silicon Valley would become the epicenter of suicidal depression, because really what you've lost is you've lost the end of the line. Creativity, art doesn't have an end point. It's amazing what we can do with few colours. We've only got 4 primary colours, but we're able to, and same with music. We've got a few notes and we've got whatever, but creative people keep reinventing that if they're allowed to do that. What we've got here is a bunch of guys that are taking that away from us, for one thing. But if the reverse was true, then we'd be taking away. I'm not so sure where technology would go if they didn't have this. It's almost like we're compelled to do it because there wouldn't be anything else. I mean, I think in an ideal world, the way to do it has already been mentioned within conversations that you've had with other people, and that is, I think everybody knows that if we stop right now and really utilize this technology and really got to know how it works and control it in a much more, I can go into concepts that I've got even for how to solve, this copyright problem to do with artists and all the rest of it. But it'd have to be the people who are doing this, willing to do that. But I think they're willing it the wrong way. So for example, the idea of having something called AI Clear, whereby it would be a clear AI that is allocated to you personally, and whatever you generate, this truly would be your, in my case, it might be a collaborator as an artist. Whatever I create through that sort of, that thing becomes mine. Nobody else can lift from it or anything else. But instead, we've got an entirely free for all of
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. I keep coming to this idea of sort of like neighborliness. And it's like, if you do something that's going to affect your neighbor, you talk with them about it. You get their consent. Like if I have a tree that's hanging from my yard over onto your yard and our two trees are intertwined and I need to cut my tree back for my reason, I go to you and I talk to you and I say, hey, is it okay if I cut the tree? Because this is what it might do to your yard. Like this whole notion is just missing from this thing. Like, Dario says there's a 10 to 25% chance his work is going to kill everybody and then goes to work the next day. Like if I told you there's a 10 to 25% chance if you open the front door of your house, your neighbor's going to fall over dead, you'd probably stay in your house for a month.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's just this sense of obligation to your neighbor is just completely.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, I mean, I think if you've seen Don't Look Up, this is where we're at. I mean, looking at America from the outside, I mean, I'm in England and I get to see America through YouTube. And so I'm not just looking at AI, I'm looking at all kinds of stuff going on. And, but when you watch that movie, we're all behaving like that, or at least the vast, enough of the people that are important just either not seeing it and not being told about it. I mean, I think this is the problem, I don't know where everybody gets their news from. I mean, this is the first year that I've actually really paid attention to YouTube, whereas in the past, to be honest with you, I would have not even looked at the news. Like, the guest the other week, when the COVID thing was on, I kind of just ignored it. I just threw myself into drawing and painting. Whereas this time, this really hit me. But it hit me for a reason. And that is because it hit me at the core of actually who I am. It was attacking me personally and, everything that I stand for. And so I think when I talk about the primal sort of reaction to this, I kind of, once again, going back when I'm writing the book, I'm almost giving myself a bit of a reserve with it, in that I'm thinking, okay, well, if it all turns out to be nonsense, I can make it into a science fiction movie. And so I'm kind of playing, I'm letting loose with the concepts, but they kind of all make sense as well. And so in terms of this primal thing, it's almost like if you think about, when a caveman would have met a saber-toothed tiger, there would have been, it's the flight or fight or freeze, or there may be three of them. Now, a big part of this year has been getting to know myself and really trying to understand why I would react in such a way that I'd go for the entire year writing about a subject that I would have not had an interest in. And the last thing I would have thought about is having a conversation with somebody like yourself 12 months later. So, but going back to the primal thing, so when the saber-toothed tiger confronts or should I say the other way around, the caveman sees the saber-toothed tiger, then what obviously kicks in there is this primal instinct. It's an instinct to survive. And, but it might take maybe 2 to 3 seconds for your brain to basically weigh up all your odds and then give you a solution.
Yeah. I feel like one of the reasons it's so hard for people is they look over and they see the AI guys like petting the saber-toothed tiger. They're like, oh, everything's going to be fine. This isn't a tiger. This is a kitty cat. This is like every cat you've ever seen before. It'll never hurt you. high five. If we don't do it, someone else will. This is our moment. Rah, 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 let's go kind of attitude that makes them unplug their own instinct to survive.
Like I say, I mean, I strongly suspect it's more to do with the fact that they wouldn't have anywhere else to go if they didn't do it. And I think it has a kind of a knock-on effect, really, to do with, because when this is the problem that we have, I suppose, really, is that anybody that would want to know about AI would have to go down the rabbit hole, because looking at YouTube as a source of information, you've got so many different headlines. One of them saying AI is going to kill us. The other one saying you can make a lot of money from doing that. And so you've got to go through a process of figuring out where you resonate most.
Yeah.
Now, even in that, I think you have to have been of a certain age to really read people, because there are some people that perhaps can't read people. And I think it's one of the biggest problems why Sam Altman's where he is because they can't read him. When you've seen it, I'm 6'1", and I come from a time when we didn't have computers, and I'm an artist, and so therefore I'm a character designer, and a big part of character design is observing and studying mannerisms, and the other thing that I found that has been an attribute for me is the fact that I've worked in film and story, and therefore, trying to look for plausible plot lines and plausible dialogue. You kind of notice it when it doesn't sort of fit. So, for example, so Sam would say to Lex Friedman 2 or 3 things which other people might not notice, but it makes me curious about his personality rather than just taking account of what he's actually just said. So on the one hand, he was saying that this is not a creature, this is a machine, which leads me to think that he has and furthermore, I think Lex said something along the lines of, how would you feel if the computer disagreed with you? And he said, well, I'd have a visceral response to it. I really wouldn't like it. And I thank Steve Jobs for putting a handle on the back of an iMac so I could throw it out the window. And so if I then get back into doing the way that I'm doing this as a potential science fiction movie, because the thing about it is that because I don't understand computers, and I don't know what goes on in the inside, I have to look at the broad stroke of this thing. And so therefore, I've either got one of 2 choices: this thing's awake or it isn't. I don't think anybody really knows what consciousness is and all the rest of it. But if we listen to Mo Gaudet, who then will say, we should bring them up like children, but in the same breath say that we kill them all the time, because we're punishing them, and then Jan LeCun saying, we're going to put emotions into these things. We start to lose sight of what it is to feel things for people, and that's where it really starts to disturb me. Because there's a real lack of empathy going on with this.
Yeah, and it's just like you described. There is even among the experts, even if you take the 2 teams, right? Like the team that's team safety and team let's race ahead, it's fine. There is gross disagreement on both teams internally, fundamentally throughout the whole thing, which, for someone who's trying to come in and get a quick, we're so used to quick sound bites, quick snippets, quick headlines. Like I should be able to understand a story in 10 seconds, 5 seconds, if I just, as I'm in my scroll. And this is not that. Like this thing is not that. You can't pick it up that fast.
Well, I think, if we go back to Alan Turing sort of, saying what he said, to do with, if we do this, then machine, the future's going to belong to the to the machines, and other scientists have said, it's like, summoning the devil and all this sort of stuff. I think everybody's of the understanding that we're dealing with something quite unusual, to say the least. But even if we looked at it, and I think this is part of the problem, really, is that I think what needs to be projected to normal people is a kind of almost a simplified version of this thing. And so the way I see it is that they're trying to build a brain, and even in that, we've got a problem because we really don't know enough about the brain. That's like building a spaceship without knowing how a spaceship works. And so you're taking a punt on this thing. And listening to somebody else today about, I think it was Tristan. Is it Tristan Harris?
Yeah, Tristan Harris. He's great. Yeah.
And he was on Josh Rogan, and he gave a really great description of the simplistic process of how this thing came about. And essentially, it's taking data and shoving as much of it in as you can possibly get in, and all of a sudden these emergent qualities start to come out, which is probably where Midjourney came from. It was just, and somebody probably thought, oh, we can make some cash from that. I think there's more to it than that, but the point being is that they and Mo Gaudet would have said the same thing. Has said the same thing. It's not so much a process of building this thing; it's a process of growing it. Now, if we sort of look at that in normal human terms, what exactly, if we were watching a horror movie, it would be horrific because you're pumping in so many personalities into one brain, and then you're expecting natural things to happen. That's I have no idea how they go about things within the computer world, but the principle of it doesn't work.
That's really interesting. Even just on the explain it to a first grader principle, take all the brains on Earth, smash them into one, and
you've got a multi-personality disorder on steroids.
Yeah. So let's talk about this, Steve. Let's talk about what it is like to carry this weight. I have different days, different weeks, different months where I sort of, am in different ways about it. I'm currently kind of feeling a little bit up. Like I'm kind of feeling like I'm going to talk about it in the podcast. I want to celebrate in 2024. I want to make 2024 a year of celebrating life. Like let's just enjoy it and act like our time is precious. And as you said, if we're just totally wrong and it's Y2K and we're the crazy ones, then great. I'll be the happiest person on earth. I literally would be so thrilled to be wrong. What is it like for you on a daily basis to carry the weight of this knowledge when you walk around, I'm sure like I do, and you see people running around about nonsense? You turn on TV, everybody's upset about nonsense, and nobody is dealing with this. How do you process going through the world like this?
Well, I'm really lucky. I'm because I'm an artist, and now it would seem a writer as well. I'm able to use it to be stimulated. And so
awesome.
It's actually expanded my brain this year in terms of, the things I'm more aware of, just by going through the process of trying to, within the book that I'm doing, I'm kind of trying to do it as a dual thing, really. One is to try to inform of what I see is happening with this, but at the same time to celebrate the other part of what it's about, and that's human creativity and what that actually means. And also within that, what I'm kind of hoping to do is to kind of try and educate people, particularly in the arts area, of kind of understanding what you're losing rather than gaining by using such as one of these text to image models, because I think the way that these things are promoted is that they will say, for example, it'll get you started, it'll get you through those hard bits, and there's an awful lot of presumptuousness going on with that, particularly if you're selling a product that's going to affect every single person in every single area, and so therefore everybody should have these difficult moments. Well, it certainly isn't the case with that within art. I think it's really important that you start with that blank page, and I think if you had the choice, if you have two white rooms, whereby you've got either you've got a pencil and paper, and that's all, and someone said to you, go into that room and I will give you a word, and I want you to create something based on that word or that sentence. And so you've got two choices. You can go in there and do it yourself, or you can take a robot or whatever in with you, and you can sit down and watch them do that. First and foremost, when you go in and you sit down in front of a white piece of paper, I remember one particular time I worked on a film which at the time was called Evil Me. It turned out to be Despicable Me. But I spoke to the French producer of this thing. I was only there at the beginning of it in terms of, I'd been asked to pitch some designs to basically, then if I got that, I would get the full job and everything else. It just so happens it was Carter Goodrich that got the gig in the end, but, and he's such a great artist anyway. But the whole point is that they were at such an early stage of this film that they literally didn't know anything about the story. And so I kind of, as an artist, you've been hired to do some visual development work for a story. And in this case, there wasn't a story there. And so I said, well, what can you tell me about it? And they said, well, he's evil and he wants to steal the moon. And that was kind of about it. Now, if you sort of compare the two situations, whereby if you give a computer or Midjourney the word evil, it's going to come up with nothing much more than various evil sort of images. You'd have to keep adding in your instincts for certain things. Now, as a human illustrator, for me, taking the word evil, I then call upon things that I consider to be evil, and then I'll match them up with the fact that I'm doing a children's movie, therefore you're watering that down, and you're trying to find a middle ground with all kinds of things, and that you're taking, you want it to be evil, but not that evil, So I might come up with things like, what does he have for breakfast? And I thought, well, he'd eat black toast, and so, and the whole point is that as a creative person, that's you're stimulating your mind all the time, and every time you struggle to find something, you've learned something from that struggle, and they all go into little compartments, and you eventually, you sort of build, you start to develop your skills and develop your instincts, and and I think it's that stuff that is going to be erased immediately. That it's almost like the severing the base roots of creativity, and furthermore, I think the other problem that I have with the technology is that I think it could do untold damage to kids that are in school right now, because if you're right now, leading up to 2022, you were in college and you were studying to be a games designer, or for that was your idea, and you wanted to do digital painting, and you're really trying to hone your craft, and you're trying to develop your style, and the idea is that you then go and send your portfolio to these companies and they select you and all the rest of it. if those companies are going to start to adopt AI technology, then it stops that sort of aspiration to become that. And so at the very least, it's going to cause a serious amount of confusion with where people are at right now, because there's such an uncertain, who's going to use it, who isn't going to use it, how good is it going to get? I mean, I think this is the other thing. I think people make the mistake that what they're seeing now is what it's going to be. This thing doesn't have an end point by its design. It's not going to stop growing in intelligence. It's not going to stop. If the target for the people that are evolving all these little tools is to get to the end result of a thing that makes a movie just by typing in the words, then you can be sure that that's where they're trying to get to. Nobody said they're going to stop at any particular point. So the train's always moving. We're never going to be able to keep up with it.
Right. And so I heard Sam Altman talk the other day at some, YouTube video I watched of him talking, and he kept referring the whole time to how thrilled he was that he was hearing that ChatGPT-4 is delighting the users. And he kept using this word delight. It's delighting them. It's delighting them. Like, we're trading existential risk for 8 billion people for various assorted delight. Like, it's not like they said, we're going to focus all of our AI efforts on climate change, solving cancer, ending hunger. Narrow AI systems, one that's just working on climate change, one that's just working on cancer, one that's just working on hunger. They have to go for the general system that does everything, literally at the expense of those narrower systems, right? Like, all the effort that's being put into making AGI, were it put into using a narrow AI to solve cancer, right, has just as much a chance of getting there faster than they do to AGI. And yet, these guys with childhood science fiction fantasies want their thing. They want to wake up the thing off the table and see it walk around the room.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some even more scary potential with this, because there's a kind of an added incentive that wasn't there before in our lives, and that is the potential for curing death. And I think when we consider that as a carrot,
yeah, I think people will find that quite shocking who, have not been as far down the YouTube rabbit hole as you and I have. Life extension is absolutely a part of this thing. Making people live to be 150 or maybe even never die is a real achievable thing in this world as they talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, actually, because I think it's easy to. I think part of the problem with anything like what we're talking about or any of the other things is that we're all trying to give the definitive sort of answer to it all, or the thing that's going to reach enough people for everyone to wake up.
Yeah.
First and foremost, we don't live in a world where that's possible. And I think this is where I do start to worry about various other things, because I do have quite an active imagination, and it leads me off into all kinds of directions. And it led me all the way back to the pyramids, and it led me back to Greek times in particular. And I couldn't help but wonder about the World Wide Web in of itself, because it's always been known to me that was given as a gift to people, but then so was the Trojan horse, and I think everything can be built around that, and I think I think we might be in a trap, is what my feeling is.
Yeah. All right, so I want to get back to
a nice no.
No. I want to get into what it's like to carry this weight. Like I want to get when you're in the supermarket line and you're looking at the person in front of you and they're all upset about who's on their phone or what the register's doing or whatever's happening. And, or, some things that hit me is like, I'll see an ad for like retirement planning or like, some of this stuff. And I'm kind of like, sure. Okay. I don't know how I feel about people investing a ton of their time and effort into like 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Well, what?
We have this,
Yeah. I mean, you asked me before how I live with it, and I think this is why I'm, even now, having said even the smallest amount of things that are really going on in my mind with this stuff, I feel quite nervous about it because the last thing I want to do is to, I've kept it from my family to a large degree because, Lisa, my wife, she quite rightly, she doesn't want it to be a weight that she actually carries. And I suppose her point of view, probably the same as most people, is you're better not knowing. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. So I think that's part of the problem with this is that, I always think conspiracy is a truth that you don't want to hear. It's something that you'd prefer to call a conspiracy rather than actually acknowledge that it could possibly be true. And so going back to like you, I went over to Manchester the other day with my daughter. We spent a full day in Manchester, Christmas shopping, went to life drawing. We had a great time. And not once did I think about artificial intelligence. But what's really weird about it is that, because it's so kind of ingrained into me at the moment, because I'm, concentrating on writing and trying to get everything down, trying to make sense of it. It's very much a defense mechanism for me because I found myself in a thing whereby I need to know how I'm getting out of this. And it's taken me, rather than 2 seconds of seeing a saber-toothed tiger, it's taken me 12 months for my mechanism to give me some form of an answer to this thing. But with all of that, I could still be in Manchester and not think about anything, to the point that I even found myself looking around and thinking, am I just making this up? Because the world is so complicated. How can it possibly go sideways?
Totally. I have those moments all the time.
Yeah, and Tristan Harris said the same thing, and he, between him and Asa Raskin, is it? They were describing it as the rubber band effect, in that, you'll leave. They were giving a talk, might have been a TED talk or whatever, and they were basically saying that, once you listen to this, a lot of those things will go in, and it'll give you, it'll prick your conscience or give you thoughts about various things or whatever, but it won't be long before you're back into whatever you're doing, and it'll have gone, and you go back to where your original form, and I think that's even a problem for me to and also as well, I've got to get my brain back after this year, really, and the end point for me is to put it down into some sort of document that kind of records it.
It's when I first read the article and before I did the podcast 6-7 months ago, the first thing I did was just start writing because I'm a writer, and I just started writing this document, and it basically became what became the first episode of the podcast. But it got to be about 22 pages in Google Docs, and I sent it around to all my friends and everybody I know, and a couple people were like, "Oh, that's crazy." Most people ignored it, and it's just like so. Then the podcast came out of that effort. So you writing a book, I wrote a paper, and it turned it into a podcast. It's this effort to like, I think people who are empathetic and generally want the best for other people, given this input, you have to like go through this effort to like, how can I tell people? How can I do something? What can we do? This is, the natural human instinct. It's, first of all, my first instinct was, let me prove it wrong. And I couldn't. And I just found that shocking. I just found the arguments from the people on the side of it's okay to be so weak on the face, just really disingenuous and, like unwatchably weak arguments in the face of incontrovertible academic science, it seemed like. And it's just so hard to think of. So for like your wife, right? Like, what do we do about people who say, even if you're right, I don't want to hear, I've got too much going on. I got too many other problems and we can't even fix this one. So don't bring me down with that unfixable problem. What do we do about that?
I mean, I think if I'm being honest,
I got a lot of those people in my life.
Yeah. I think once again, I don't even want my daughters to see it really, this thing, because I don't really want, you remember when you were that age, the daughters are 12.
How old are your daughters?
21 and 25, I think.
Okay.
Terrible, this sort of thing, but I know. But it flies by. You think, oh, was that?
Oh, I know. I've got two 18-year-olds. I'll hopefully be where you are shortly.
Yeah. But they're both, having the best lives and looking forward with optimism and all the rest of it. So, you don't want to be crushing that.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a very difficult thing because you at the same time, you're sitting with this kind of what you believe to be the truth. I mean, I'm sure yourself, that there are times possibly that you think maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm just becoming a conspiracy theorist, all of those things. So, but then again, how do you not say it? How do you,
Right. Yeah.
And what's the reason? And what's the reason for saying it? And I think the only thing that I can really put that down to is that I can't help but feel as though that's the only way that things are going to change is if there is enough of what I'd call a social consciousness about something. But unfortunately, we're not back in the 1970s whereby you've got one TV set that has 3 TV channels.
I want to go back to what you were saying about your wife and your daughter, and because I deal with this on a daily basis. I am so torn. I don't want them to think about it at all. I don't want my kids to be thinking about this at all. There's literally nothing they can do about it. I want them to be being 18 and thinking about where they're going to college and having fun and, all the wonderful, amazing things about being 18. And yet we have no time to lose. Like, if this is a soccer game, we're losing 20-0 and there's 2 minutes left. Like, I'm so torn about the desire to like shout this from the rooftops to try to wake up anyone, and the need to be respectful and loving of the people in my life, and letting them not get to where we are with this, because that's bad or that's good. It's like, what is...
Yeah, and I know you've asked to sort of finish on a kind of a more optimistic note. I mean, I suppose the only thing that I cling on to really is because I do see so many discussions about, from such as the Munk debate and all the rest of it. But then recently I saw one with Elon Musk and Tate, the other guy. But anyway, they were talking as though they completely understood and were trying to gather together a some momentum to get enough weight behind at least trying to see sense in stopping it at where we are now. Really, I think that's the point where, you know, I'd be very optimistic if that was a decision that was made. But I do worry that the incentives of the people that are pushing this aren't aligned with that way of thinking. That's what I'm most concerned about, I think, really. I don't know if we can, if I'm being honest, because I think to really sort of for this thing to really impact you, I think it has to demonstrate something that is a problem, and I think most people can't see how a tool that makes pictures or gives you your homework is anything but a good thing to a lot of people. And even if you said to them, well, by letting that thing do it for you, you're not going to learn, and therefore, you know, and of course, then if you've got a teacher in your pocket, that's, you know, what happens to the teachers, and, you know, you can then say, for example, well, you know, if you allow a facial recognition, whatever avatar, that's going to replace actors, and therefore we get rid of actors, and then the makeup artists disappear, and, you know, you start saying, well, then what you're going to be left with, if we carry on the way we are doing, is a very odd movie based on anything but human perspective. You know, and I'll be honest with you, John. One of my biggest concerns is that we've got a very, very narrow window of exposure to these thoughts, because if that stuff escalates and then it starts to saturate all our social media sites and all the rest of it, and we literally can't find a voice that resonates with us and all the rest of it, you know, that's basically, it's almost like blacking it out without blacking it out, because you know, there is no communication then. There's certainly no way that you can build up enough momentum to stop anything. So yeah, you literally wouldn't be able to fight against anything. And so yeah, I think we're very locked into the problem of phones, basically. I think we're addicted to them. I'm less so, because I really don't look at it, but generally speaking, I think that's what it is. And I think we, you know, when we think about the way that images, well, don't do a video more than 3 seconds or whatever, because people haven't got that attention span. Even that should be a problem for people to understand. Hold on a minute, what's happening with our attention span? You know, you know, but it's like it's almost like it's an acceptable trade. You know, yeah, you can have my privacy, you can have my whatever, as long as I get my little fix for this that actually doesn't do anything. So yeah, and also, you know, sorry to say this, but going back to the idea that if this didn't exist, if AI didn't exist, you know, you then think, well, what would we be doing in the world if that didn't exist? Because it sounds like we're talking about where we don't want any technology. I love technology. You know, I love my iPad, I love my computer. Yeah. I love all the toys that these, you know, the same things that I want to see floating cars. I want to see whatever. So it's not that.
I'm seeing from over here.
No. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, I don't know anyone that actually talks about anything to do with this. It's more talking about what the football match was or whatever. So just general chit chat.
I too have been looking for people, that see this the same way and have been on the same sort of journey of learning about it that I think you and I have been on. What does it feel like to, finally spend a little time and talk about it openly and in a setting where, we don't have to keep it from people that we care about because we're worried about hurting them.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this is a real breakthrough for me. I mean, for one thing, obviously it feels like I'm exposing myself in a way that I perhaps wouldn't feel comfortable with normally. I mean, not the conversation, but the idea that other people will be able to listen to points of view and all the rest of it. But that again, that's the whole point of trying to build up a kind of a conversation, really. I think that's the most important thing. I mean, I'm hoping that you and I can at least correspond at some point after this as well to sort
Absolutely.
of keep a connection with the few of us that have kind of been more deeply affected than others, to the point that we want to try and get a message out there of some sort. I mean, I think for me, once again, I think it's very much a focus on trying not to lose what we have more than so much what we could gain if we just raced hell for leather for something. I think, like you were saying, I think if this sort of technology could somehow be slowed down, I think we have to have some hope that may or may not happen at some point. Are you still there, John, by the way?
Yes, I'm here. Yep, I can see you and I can hear you. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just that yours is frozen. I just want to just.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Yeah.
I want to. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think particularly from if I could isolate it just from the art point of view, my feeling is that the technology companies within this technology, or the concept of it, I think they've underestimated the complexity of human beings in this particular territory. And I think they kind of looking at the end product rather than the journey that each of us have to go on to get to where we want to be. And I'm hoping that these sort of conversations will start to bring out similar feelings about what we aspire to be, what we want to be.
So how will you go forward? Are you going to go and try to convince people that this is happening? Are you going to keep that conversation in your back pocket? How do you sort of deal with case by case? Who do you talk to? When? How?
Well, I mean, I suppose this is where the book comes into play, really, because I mean, for me, it's a way of obviously getting down everything that I need to say, and then it's kind of trying to find ways of, I suppose, finding people to read it, doing my part. There's not just me, obviously. There's yourself. There's any number of people saying more or less the same thing. But I think it would. I mean, I'd love to get involved with a group chat with so many different points of view on this thing, really, because I think personality plays a big part. I mean, we all live very, very different lives. We have very different perspectives on things, and different things affect us. Different things push us to act upon something or whatever. And I think we need to find this kind of, in a strange kind of way, it's a bit like the alignment problem. You're trying to gather in so many different sort of perspectives. And we are, after all, dealing with a technology that's trying to do just that. It's trying to pull everything together.
Yeah. Yeah. I have an encouraging, positive thing to end on, I feel like. You ready for this? So this was Eliezer Yudkowsky last night on Twitter. Posted something that really got my attention, and I was like, is Eliezer maybe giving us another point, moving from 98? He moved us from 99 to 98. Are we getting to 97? He said, the reason we'll die is if people don't see it coming, not because nothing could actually be done if we saw it coming. And so I felt emboldened in it. Yeah, right? The reason we'll die is if people don't see it coming, not because nothing could be actually done if we saw it coming.
Yeah, it's true. I'm just, I'm just trying to figure out, probably like you, I'm just trying to picture what exactly it is that needs to be done or said by whom for this to become a much more universal topic.
Yes.
Yes. If like in this country, they tag on AI at the end of the news like some sort of a novelty thing, then no one's going to really pay that much attention to it or take it seriously. And I do really stress this. If anyone watches Don't Look Up, you can see everything happening within that, and you really should be saying to yourself, where do I fit in within that movie? Which character am I? Yeah. I can pick out Eliezer in that, and he is without doubt the Leonardo DiCaprio character. And he's been completely ignored. And the network, the news items, they're taking it very lightly. It's a very clear reflection on where we are with everything.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. Watch the movie.
And John, if you really do sit down and watch that movie right through to the very end, for me, those last scenes are really quite emotional, because it's done in such a sensitive way that it really comes home what we could lose if we're not careful.
It is incredibly powerful. The end of it is viscerally terrifying, and incredibly powerful. I wonder what percent of the Earth's population has seen that movie and actually thought about it as AI. Just even that simple exercise right there, probably less than 10%.
What you've got in that, you've got characters that play every single part that's being played out. So you've got the Steve Jobs character, which reflects any one or a combination of all the tech sort of leaders. You've got the president of the United States and her entourage that know nothing and couldn't possibly even begin to catch up with an understanding on how to work out a trajectory of something or whatever, let alone how to fix something that even the creators of something can't figure out. And so you've got a lot of that kind of strange, it's funny because we laugh at a movie like that, and it's a good thing, but we really should be looking at it seriously as well, because it's kind of it's showing a mirror to us, really.
Absolutely.
And
Steve, yeah.
Sorry, one very last thing on to do with the Netflix thing as well. I mean, I'm sure you would have recommended it as well, but The Social Dilemma is a good example of where people sort of and their approach to things, because Social Dilemma is a documentary about just what it says, the social media thing, and it's not an easy watch, because it really does register as being the absolute truth. But people won't watch it, A, because it's a documentary, and two, they know at the end of it they're not going to feel very good about it. And I think it's, and yet it only takes an hour for you to absorb something that's quite important, rather than just not.
Yeah. No, it's an excellent movie. I started this thing out as a podcast, but really in my head, I think I see it becoming a community of people who have this awareness and feel, the obligation to tell others. And so I'm so appreciative of you reaching out to me, coming on here, having this conversation. I really got a lot out of it, and it is comforting to know, there might be some water in between us, but we're sort of seeing the same things out there. And it was a true pleasure to meet you, and I hope we'll certainly stay in touch as we move through this thing and hopefully get it to a better place, right?
Yeah, I'd love that. And I've really, the one thing I will say is that if ever you do get round to sort of having a conversation between, lots of different sort of viewpoints on this thing, I think what would be nice to see, rather than having what we see so much of, and that is, and particularly in the case of the Munk debate, where they're really just trying to argue the point but never finding a middle ground. I think this is the important thing, really, is to stop arguing it and try and aim towards what we'd all like, really, and that's a really good future for everybody.
A really good future for everybody. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That is what we all want. So I hope you got a lot out of that. Thank you so much, Steve, for coming on the show. Okay, so now I have a bit of news. The next 2 shows are all lined up, and the guests are going to bring a lot that is new and interesting to our conversation. So if you like, you can get ahead a little bit and do some homework on these guests and check their workout. Next week, we will have Theo Jaffe on the show. I'm really excited about that. Theo is a big-time up-and-comer in the AI podcasting world. He is a very young guy who has already had big-time guests on his podcast, and he only started out last July. He only has 10 shows done so far. They can be 2 to 3 hours long and highly technical, but they are great for anyone who wants to get deeper into this stuff. So Theo is a self-described techno-optimist. I had been looking for someone to come on the show and debate me from a different perspective. I cannot wait to talk that through with him. And then in 2 weeks, we will have author Darren McKee on the show. His book, Uncontrollable, seeks to explain AI risk to a non-technical audience just like this show. I just finished his book, and wow, lots of new and really interesting stuff in there. You're going to really love the last third of the book, particularly, which has 8 proposals for safe AI innovation at the end. Some were new to me, and honestly, they are all kind of exciting and promising, I think. Okay, so lastly, our weekly celebration of life in 2024. We don't know what comes next, so we're going to live life like every moment is precious. So for today's celebration of life, I have a twofer, something for our video audience as well as something for our audio audience. I am a big fan of singer-songwriter John Mayer. That's something you're going to learn about me as we get to know each other here. And during COVID, Mayer had a live show on Instagram called Current Mood. On it, he would play music, have guests, just do kind of fun, silly stuff. One night, he performed a little song he had just written. The background score is on a Casio keyboard. The song is called You Are Still You. It was meant for COVID, but I think it works really well with AI risk awareness too. You may know that AI is coming to kill us all, but you are still you. So for our video audience, we have a bonus as well. I'm going to put some of Steve Hanson's poignant, playful, often delightfully dog-focused artwork on top of John's very simple song. Please enjoy.
You are still you. You are still fun. Even when you're singing to a crowd of one. Though the present situation can be scary, you're the him or her you were in January, and all your friends will help to see you through. So don't be blue. You are still you. You are still you. You still got style. Even if you don't put pants on for a while. I know it all can seem to be a bit confusing. All the days and weeks and months you may be losing, running out of clever things to do. But it still holds true. You are still you. You are still you. That will not change. Even though the times we're living in are strange. Even if you cry a couple times a day, I would say it helps to keep the pain at bay. It's certainly as sad can be. But believe you me, you are still you.
You are still you. AI risk cannot take the you away. You can know what you know and still fully enjoy your life and remain yourself. So I hope you enjoyed that. Big thanks to my new friend, Steve. Okay, so please go check out Theo Jaffe's podcast. The Liron Shapira episode, if you're looking for a good first one to start, is a great place for you to start. Next week's episode is the first where you will see me interviewing someone on the other side of this debate. It's really good. I'm excited for you to see the first of many For Humanity debates where I mix it up with some of the people that I think are really the doomers. Also, don't forget Darren McKee's book, Uncontrollable. I will put links to both in the description. For Humanity, I'm John Sherman. I'll see you right back here next week.